like I said, the younger women are like, as long as they have the money, they can take them shopping and do all this stuff. They'll play games with them for a while, but the minute it feels like the responsibility is something more than they want you to endure, they'll be telling him bye-bye. Good evening and welcome to another episode of Purpose and Powerful Podcast. I'm your host, Erica Lester, along with my esteemed co-host,
The real Jabril Wilson. What's going on, E?
Oh, it's going great. So tonight our topic, Payback is a Brother, no nurse, no maid. What we're doing is we're diving into the dating challenges faced by women ages 40 and up, and I would even argue 30 and up or older in today's dating environment. And why is that payback is a brother? Because when these wonderful young men are younger, they can date women of all ages. And as they get to 50 and above, that health starts declining, and they're not as viral. So they're looking for maids, they're looking for nurses, and women their age are like, no, I don't want that. Younger women are like, as long as the money can spend and you're still fun, it still works out. However, now that the health is not where it needs to be and you need that support, of course you want to go back to those old flames who people you cared about, that cared about you, would be good targets. And they're like, no, you had your chance, that's up. And statistically speaking, men do tend to die alone. And I mean alone by everyone dies alone. But the men in the nursing homes, they don't have quite as many visitors. The children don't check up on them or care for them quite as much or as frequently. And so they do not have the love and support that their women counterparts have. So Dr. Jabril, men over 40, what would you say to them as they've played the field and they're getting a little older? Should settling down be top of mind, or should they keep just doing their regular state of affairs?
A great question. I mean, I don't know if they have to settle down, but I think that they should stop playing games. And even if it's just friendship, because you don't have to have a companion. You can have friends because you don't want to die alone. And that would be the worst thing if barely anyone showed up at your funeral. So I would say that start building friendships. So before we even talk about settling down, start friendships. Some of us have not learned to even have a friendship because we've been playing from the beginning when it comes to the opposite sex. If you haven't gotten the fundamentals of just being a true loyal friend, and at this age in your downcline, you're expecting somebody to give you everything, and you're the damaged goods, I wouldn't suggest that. The key is clean your plate or your slate and focus on being a true friend and adding value that way.
I like that. In previous episodes, you've mentioned that you really felt the need to shift to find someone after having been divorced for over 10 years, that they had the right to say, where are you? When you come home, you have somebody to, as your steady plus one and looking forward to spending the holidays with, because you mentioned that you knew if you did make that choice that you would just be like the men that we're describing right now. What was it? Was there one or two things that really were top of mind when you were considering that you needed to find someone you wanted to spend your life with?
Well, when you're working on your business, you have business and personal goals. And I'm really close with my mother, and I have a daughter. So, I'm seeing me have an inconsistent lifestyle that's unpredictable. Even for the holidays, you bring one person one year and the person says, I'll see you next time. And now you have another person, or this is the time that you're by yourself. And so that was something I wanted. I wanted consistency. And I wanted to be a model for something that I would want the best for my own daughter. For those that meant a lot. And you can't build something without consistency. Even with the podcast, we've been consistent. It's a lot of things that are shining out there, but they're not consistent. And no one really remembers something that's not consistent. It's like a one-hit wonder. In relationships, we tend to have those, and it's best to be consistent. So I knew in a marriage that would be consistent. You would know who you're coming home to. You'd know you know you're with someone where you go certain places and they may be free at that seminar or at that event, but they don't know where they're going afterwards. They just don't know, and that's not a good place to be. That's very important.
Interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
So what would you say is the hardest thing when it comes to men recognizing that they need to see more about their health, or what is it about that? So like women, we tend to, we make the doctor's appointments, we go to the doctor's appointments, we're concerned about him, we're concerned about the kids, we're concerned about everyone, having, all their relevant checkups and different things like that. You think it's just more like a pride thing if a man doesn't really necessarily, or they're thinking that that's not really as important when they're considering that being a factor in a relationship?
You mean for their own health? I
Right.
mean,
So making decisions about routinely getting checkups, making sure they're getting their annual exams and things like that.
right. Well, I think it's two things. I think that men, I mean, once you're a man, you feel that you're Superman and that you have a certain responsibility. You don't want to look weak. We're taught to not cry. So you don't want to be sick. And if you are sick, you want to just feel that you can overcome anything. And I mean, but it's the same thing that happens when you go to the doctor and you know you haven't been taking care of yourself. So there is a sense of anxiety. You might want to admit it, but I had the procedure Friday, and it was something I was supposed to get done almost 2 years ago. But I just kept pushing and pushing, and it wasn't pride. I just thought that I would be okay. But you don't really know what's going on the inside until you get checked out. And just assuming based on how you feel is definitely the wrong way. Well, I think that's one thing that I would say that we tend to just neglect it, and we're pushed, and society teaches us to push out and push and push and push. Unfortunately, I had a friend, next door neighbor, who just passed away of a heart attack, 45 years old, Tuesday. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, because he looked healthy, but you just don't know what's going on internally. I've heard he had health problems, but again, we will get a warning, and still, as men, a lot of times we just keep pushing. And you're right, the woman will address those things. She'll research the stuff and find remedies, find support systems. He's very vocal about it, but we suffer in silence. And I just think it's different. So why do you think that women tend to pay more attention to their health and the men do not?
I think it's our innate nurturing that really is at top of the mind there, because we are caring for the children, we are caring for him, we are caring for ourselves, and usually women put themselves last. So that's also a factor. So when you talked about men trying to be supermen, I think sometimes we try to be super women. We're trying to say, okay, well, my kid has a cold, so let me go and check. Let's check this fever out. Let's go take them to ER. Let's do all of these different things. And so then sometimes we can be the last on our list, but some things that are kind of routine, it's, the OBGYN appointment. And then if you're over 40, some mammograms, and then the colonoscopies and all of the different things that come along with it. I think the other part of the challenge is recognizing your aging process. So like this week, I started to take note of people that are in my same age, range, age bracket, and different things like that. That I'm looking at my own hair and I'm like, wow, that's a lot more gray, but I know I lead a very stressful job or occupational life and do a lot of things. And then I still don't have genetically, I think this is my positive about genetically, I still don't have a lot of grays compared to some people. And I haven't like gone down the dye street, let's just go crazy and dye our hairs type things. But I have learned to really pay attention to others that are in my same age range that are like the men, the gray in their beards, the gray in their hair. I'm like, oh, it's those types of things. I think it's just really just a matter of aging, that being afraid of the aging process and recognizing that, your body is changing and you need to go see about yourself. But I just thought it was interesting now that older women are starting this movement where they're like, no dating. And they're like, they don't want to be a nurse. So they're like, I'm not dating at all. Like they're just choosing to just come out of the whole process and say, here are the positive things that I can do with my own life and my, they call it their peace now, not being bothered with men, not being at their whim and beck and call. And I just thought that was very interesting how that's becoming like the norm. When we were growing up, that was different, to be married and grandparents together, parents together. That was more of the norm. So there is a definite shift. And for older women, it's like, no, I don't want to take care of him. So it's a thing though for women over 50. They're like, yeah, no, I'm a pass. Like old flames returning because they knew that woman was a good woman, would take care of them. They're like, I don't want you. Like, you all broke down. You won't be using my health insurance. It's just a whole movement that I was not aware of. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. Let me dig down into it, especially if he knows like she works in the medical field, right? A nurse or a traveling nurse or something like that. And so it's like, well, wait a minute now. When we had better years, younger years, where we could have really spent this time together, you just want me to sign up so that I can be there for all of your breaking downs of your body. Like, I'm not signing up for that. Like, that's not what I want to do. I understand it in the perspective of you want to share good quality years together, and women, especially if they've taken care of children and the children are grown, they're not wanting that. And they're like, okay, well, if we're gonna be, I know I can count on my children because they're going to be there for me. They'll usually, even if even if children put them in nursing homes, they'll still come visit and they'll be there making the decisions. But statistically, the men, no one comes to visit them. Half of them don't even know they're there. And they just die alone. And, they might get the affection of the caregiver, right? But family will put you there, sit you, and forget about you for sure. So it is something that men need to consider in the long term as they are making these relationship dating choices. Like I said, the younger women are like, as long as they have the money, they can take them shopping and do all this stuff. They'll play games with them for a while. But the minute it feels like the responsibility is something more than they want to endure, they'll be telling him bye-bye. Thank you,
I tell them at
gentlemen.
all. Well, so let me just ask you, and because I seem like the audience is kind of silent today, but for you, at this stage in your life, would you date somebody who had both their parents or maybe one, and they already live with the parent, and they're taking care of the parent? How would that help in your decision making? And I mean, this guy almost checks out all the boxes, but when it comes to that, he's very connected and needed by either both parents or even just one. How do you approach that?
Well, that definitely is going to take a lot of discussion because it's more involved than caring for a kid, because with children, you can develop plans, parenting plan, daycare plan, after school care plan. They're going off to high school, they're going off to college, they're going off to their own lives. So there is a path to a child, unless it's a special needs child, right? But with a parent, that is serious business. And you and I both know recently somebody we know that they had a live-in cared for parent. So it wouldn't be an ideal situation if I'm saying I want to travel the world with my maid and he has this responsibility and he's developed a routine with this parent. So and the parent has a say. So for example, with a kid, you're like, well, you're going off to your mom's this week because I'm going off with my girlfriend or going, well, fiance or new wife or whatever, right? With a parent that, their mind is intact and they're intact, they're like, wait a minute now, I've always been here. You're gonna just toss me over for this new woman that you just met. That would pose such a problem, especially if they were very close to their parents. But it is a conversation that would be a real possibility being over the age of 40, or not even have the parent in your home, like managing that parent's home, or even okay, so for example, I just met a guy last week and we just having to talk about finances, and he talked about how he oversees his father's household, he oversees his mom's household, his household, and then he has a 15-year-old daughter who he has a parenting plan with the mother, right?
Mhm.
So I just asked, and we'll just call him Bob right now. I said, Bob, so on Bob's level, are you financially stable or financially comfortable? Bob said, I'm financially comfortable. Then I said, okay, so Bob and let's say Olivia, the daughter, that's not her name, obviously, with your management of the household where Olivia is concerned, financially stable, financially comfortable, financially comfortable. I said, okay, so then I would ask you, Bob, to consider if you're treating the parents' households like that is Bob's whole household and primary responsibility, or is it Bob's parents' primary responsibility, and then dialing back that Bob is the supplement. Because Bob as a whole was financially stable, but see how even if I decided that I would even join into that whole process, how I would want to be in the same household as Bob, and I I wouldn't be adding my parents to that, but I think that that would be something that we would definitely have to discuss as being Bob is financially responsible for these other households. So that is sort of like what you're asking, even though those parents aren't really in his home, right?
Right.
But it is an interesting wrinkle. So for me, and this is probably going to sound so crazy, but I just have to say it. For me, that would be a pass right now. For all the things that I want in a relationship, if I met someone, they could check off all the boxes and they had the parent that they were caring for in the home, I would have to pass right now until I have a very deep understanding of what I'm walking into. And then it would have to be our world together as a unit would have to be so solid that it doesn't create a problem for the existing situation. Because I could not come in and change the situation just because I arrived.
That's true. So you would put that person back into the friend zone?
I would keep them into the friend zone until they just moved some water mountains in heaven and God shined and whispered into my ear, Bob is the guy. Now,
Okay.
Bob is age appropriate. He is a year and a half older than I am. So that's why I know it's a real possibility.
Okay. So you would pass.
I
Deal.
wouldn't do a hard pass, but I would do a soft pass for sure.
Right.
And that's not being vain, that's just understanding that Bob's pulled in a direction that I had not calculated in my process as of yet.
Well, that's fair. That's fair enough. I appreciate that honesty. So those of you who are watching, and she's speaking probably for not just herself, but some other women, especially if they have their own business or things that they need to attend and they want to spend the majority of their time with their best friend, their soulmate, somebody else in that position that can compete with that is that she doesn't want to compete with that, correct?
Absolutely. So here's a question that I have recently been discovering this topic and talking about different angles of the topic. Say, and it could be yourself or you, or maybe you have this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Your wife's parent, one of your wife's parents, or your mom, they get sick and need the care, is this something that you've already spoken about? Or is the go-to like, yes, we've talked about this and nursing home is the answer? Because if you say mom comes home, you open the door for the other person's parents to be cared for at home. You couldn't be like, well, my mom only, you know.
Absolutely, I understand that. So what is the question? Are you saying?
So the question is, if the situation came down to it where you're one of your either Takesha's parents or your mother, if their health declined, have you already discussed what the next step would be if that were the case? Or have you talked about that being cared for in your married home would be an option?
We haven't. So we haven't. We've discussed it a little, but it might be a home. I don't know. I mean, spacing, it might not be our home, but the home that we currently have, it's not conducive or set up to have someone stay. So we probably have to think of something more on the outbound for any of our prospective parents.
Have your parents ever discussed what they would want in a situation like that? If they would want to be somewhere where they're perceived to not be a burden, or would they want to be directly cared for, like that is their expectation by their children?
I haven't really heard. I haven't heard. You know, I may ask my mom in a week because it's not clear. You're right, but I think that in her mind, she sees herself vibrant and moving around for another 2 to 5 years. So I don't think that that's a discussion she's wanted to bring up, and I haven't thought about it to bring it up either.
And that's what I love so much about this podcast, is because these are real situations that happen, but it's interesting the conversations that we're not having before we combine our lives with someone, because those are real possibilities that even if you do not become the caregiver, you'll be the caretaker in terms of making the decisions. And if it's the parents' mindset that, oh no, I take care for you, I raised you, how dare you? And their expectation is that you're the caregiver and caretaker, that will be very tough to sell to. And they won't be always in control. So that's why like medical directives and living wills are very important as well, because they have an idea about what quality of life they would want to have. And they may not have made the necessary arrangements, and now it becomes your financial burden, whether you elected to do so or not.
True.
So the other thing, when we were talking about earlier about men dying alone and the kids not coming by, people not visiting, the thing about that is, I was having a conversation with someone, and they did move one of the parents in, or they moved in with one of the parents, although their mate would have been the least ideal person. Like that was their, I don't want to do it, I'm not about it type of thing, but they did do that. And so I asked the person, now that gave opportunity if something would happen to one of your parents, or can they come home with you now that you guys have had that, have you thought that through? And do you know what your parents will want as the move? Or would they be okay with moving states? Would they be okay with not being in their own home? Could you financially support them in the event they had to come to your home? That's the thing. Now, in my family, for example, with my siblings directly, my sister has told me like a couple of years ago, and I think she still has the same stance. Like, yeah, mom's coming home with me, but she's like, Dad, I'm putting him in a home, and I'm why would you do that? She's like, no, I can't deal with him. I cannot. Now, my dad is very in control of himself. Obviously I have the entrepreneurial spirit that I inherited that from my dad. And my dad is not someone that he would just take orders from someone and start doing what they wanted. So he would be what we call a hard case. So arguing with him, fussing with him as if you're with a teenager, I can totally see my dad being that problem. Not because we wouldn't love him, but because we knew that, I mean, I've already prayed, Lord, if you take my dad from me, you have to take him while he's able to care and do for himself. Because anything else, and I know several older men that are like that, not being able to be in control of themselves and their decision making and different things like that would kill their spirit. And so that typical, they're gone in 5 years after the death or loss of a spouse, that would be them. Even if they would survive, the quality of life would be affected. So, but it's just, like I said, it's one of those things that could be a very real possibility, especially if you're out here dating over age 40 or
Yeah.
even yourself. The older you become, the more challenging the health issues can become. And so it could happen to anyone. They're dying as young and vibrant and healthy as they come. And yet, and still, that does not exclude you from having a medical challenge at some point in your life. Like your friend, and I'm so sorry for your neighbor. I mean, it could have been a different situation. He could have had a heart attack or a stroke, but still live, but be incapacitated.
It's so sad.
But not be ready.
And
So
just,
any recapping thoughts there, Dr. Jabril, that you'd like to share?
well, I would just say before we wrap up that people need to, one thing is just that just hit me is just take care of yourself. I mean, you got people that are had all the fun. We've had all the fun, and now we want to give somebody not our best selves, our desperate self. It's kind of now all of a sudden now we want to come and expect so much from the woman, and we had opportunities, and when we were quote unquote we thought at our best, we didn't respect the person or show them so much care or love. Well, I would say to anyone, no matter what age you are, start preparing right now. Ask for forgiveness for certain people, forgive certain people, and be the best person you can right now, because you never know who you're going to need and when you're going to need someone. So be that person that you would want people to, how they want people to treat you. That would be my recap and just my suggestion moving forward for all of us.
I agree with that. Thank you for sharing that. So next Sunday, please join us for our episode live of the evolution or illusion of independence. This is where we'll talk about how you can thrive in your independence, but not allow that independence to stop you from having a great relationship or a possible love in your life that will be there with you to the end.
We'll see you next week. Thanks so much. Thanks for all the listeners, and like and subscribe to our channel. And it's off the side.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.